A very good morning. Today is 25th June 2020. There are four articles of the Hindu editorial page. The first article is regarding China, Kashmir and the ghost of August 5th. Apart from Pakistan and its involvement in Kashmir conflict, India may now have a third party in the game, that is Beijing. The second article is regarding the coronavirus drug Favipiravir. On what basis the DCGI approve restricted use of this drug? The third article is on India-Pakistan ties. The relationship has turned from bad to worse. The fourth article is on government e-marketplaces signaling intent. India needs enhanced manufacturing capabilities and improved efficiencies. Before I begin, I am Prashant. I welcome you all to Wi-Fi Study Karo. Please do subscribe for further updates. Let's get started. This is the cartoon of the day. As the coronavirus is flattening the curve, it is taking many lives, as you can see from the picture. The first article, China, Kashmir and the ghost of August 5th. Sometimes a seemingly rhetorical statement or a symbolical political decision has undesirable ability to fundamentally alter the material reality around the particular issue, especially when it comes to the sensitive international dispute and conflicts. The impact of Bharatiya Janata Party led government's decision on the Kashmir in 2019 on the current China-India military standoff on the line of actual control is such a phenomenon. As a political scientist, the author of this article is aware of the apparent methodological overreach in his attempt at linking the two events, though it might not be analytical overreach. What is becoming clear now is that by inventing the rhetorical position around the issue of Aksai Chin and the territory of India may never have intended to took back by the force from China, New Delhi seems to have aggravated the existing Chinese sensitivities on it. Putting differently, India's infrastructure building activities in its side of line of actual control and Chinese-Pakistan economic corridor, that is CPEC, connectivity to Pakistan, were already on a collision course, and it seems to reorganization of Jammu and Kashmir on August 5th last year and the rhetoric surrounding it may have finally triggered a conflict that was building up from a long time. The ground reality is that the impact of August 5th has been felt on the two fronts of China and Pakistan. The official data shows that steady rise of violence in Kashmir since 2014, and the August 2019 decision has taken a little to reduce the despite restrictions of the movement and a heavy security presence in Kashmir. The impact of August 5th goes beyond the mere spike in violence in Kashmir. Since August, the retired Pakistani officials close to the establishment have argued that in wake of India's Kashmir decision and the Simla Agreement 1972, which forms a key basis of bilateral relationship, including the management of line of actual control or line of control in Kashmir, is not valid anymore. The Pakistani side argues that India's decision, for example, Kashmir, goes against the spirit of Simla Agreement, since the agreement states that pending of the final statement of any problem between the two countries, neither side shall unilaterally alter the situation. This of course does not take away from the fact that the Pakistan has altered the situation in Pakistan occupied Kashmir several times over the past. If indeed the reflex of emerging official thinking within Pakistan that might have serious implications. For one, this would mean that the agreement governing the India-Pakistan border in Jammu and Kashmir will no longer be a similar agreement, but as a result have to be one signed between the two sides of Karachi in 1949 at the end of the first war in 1948. Since then, the Simla Agreement formalized several territorial changes which took place in 1949 until the December 1971. Such territorial adjustment could become a null and void. This arises the two specific issues. For one, since the current ceasefire agreement between the India and Pakistan declared in 2003 is essentially a reiteration of the ceasefire agreement declared at the end of 1971 war, this could mean an end of existing ceasefire agreement between them. Secondly, if Shimla is dead, Does it mean that line of control that come into being replacing the ceasefire line in 1971 also stands nullified? In other words, the entire basis of India-Pakistan negotiations on Jammu Kashmir since 1972 may cease to exist if Pakistan decides to undermine the Simla agreement or accuse India of having done so by the August decision and then decide not to abide it. The Chinese challenge. Let us return to the impact of August 5th on the current India-China standoff. It is very clear after the August decision that Beijing was deeply uneasy about India's decision for at least two reasons. One, India a strong official claim about territory of Akasi Chin that has been under the Chinese control, and two, second reason is bringing Ladakh under the India's central rule annoyed Beijing, since it considers Ladakh border to be dispute between them. From Beijing's perspective, the August decision also complicated the ongoing boundary talks between the two sides. Pakistan appeals that the Beijing to push back against India may have sharpened the Chinese reaction. There is also some similarity between the Pakistan and Chinese position of India's August decision. Both sides argue that India changed the status of territory, that is Jammu and Kashmir, whose borders were still being negotiated. Foreign Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar visit to Beijing on August 2019 and his assurance to the China that India's decision has no implication for the external boundaries of India or the line of actual control with China. India was not raising any additional territorial claims. The Chinese concerns in this regard were misplaced. Does not claim that Beijing, Mr. Jaishankar, was right about the implication of reorganization of Jammu and Kashmir, but not the Home Minister's statement about Akasi Chin. China took the position that the India continued to damage China's territorial sovereignty by unilateral modifying the form of domestic law. The fallout of India's official stand. On to June 19, 2020, Prime Minister Modi, after all-party meeting to discuss the line of actual control standoff, stated, "Neither is anyone inside the India's territory nor anyone in the border post captured." Notwithstanding the clarifications from his office leading to even more controversy, the question is whether this was a deliberate climb down from the August rhetoric so that the calm nerves in the Beijing. We do not know. What we know, however, is that the climb down, if need, that was a cease, was not only the ineffective but may also have an opposite effect. Going by Chinese statement, neither thereafter the Prime Minister's clarification has clearly been used by the Beijing to justify its position on line of actual control. There seems to be a more worry and a second order consequence of August decision in New Delhi may have unwittingly brought China and Pakistan closer to ever more in the Kashmir question. From being somewhat neutral on the Kashmir question from 1990s to 2000, China today have aggravated party also its claims in the Kashmir conflict. If Pakistani involvement in the Kashmir conflict were not enough, we now have China in the game as well as much more powerful third party. Furthermore, we have always known that China and Pakistan shared a formidable strategical alliance, and yet be wisely de-emphasizing that the dealing with them is separately, not as a strategic alliance. New Delhi has contained their combined effect on itself a great extent. Or not more, our strategy should have to be continue to weaken the China-Pakistan alliance by engaging China economically, multilaterally and regionally. Instead, we may have brought them closer than ever. The lesson is self-evident. A country's size of India can ill afford to be narrowly tactical in its foreign and security policy decision making. Geopolitics in Southern Asia is changing way faster than we previously imagined, and therefore our decisions should have not been made on tactical and political considerations but on a cold and clear-headed strategic assessments. This article is regarding China, Kashmir and the ghost of August 5th. The next article is the coronavirus drug Favipiravir. The pandemic has not only exposed the dire situation of the public health infrastructure but also the opacity with which the drug or medical device approval are granted in India. We have many controversies over the last few months. The use of hydrochloroquine for treating COVID-19 patients. If you want to see the controversy, that is the hydrochloroquine or Sergi square controversy, you can see it from the eye icon. I have done a detailed a video discussion of the controversy of hydrochloroquine. You can see it from the eye icon right now on the screen. And specifically serological tests for detecting antibodies against the virus. Another controversy is brewing due to the opacity surrounding the regulatory approval granted by the favipiravir for the treatment of COVID-19 patients with mild and moderate symptoms. There are no scientific consensus that the Drugs Control General of India, that is DCGI, has approved Glenmark Pharmaceuticals as an Indian pharmaceutical company to sell generic versions of favipiravir for the treatment of COVID-19. This drug, originally invented by a Japanese company, was meant to treat influenza. After the outbreak of COVID-19, doctors in China and Russia started using it to treat COVID-19 patients, although there are no scientific consensus on the efficacy of the drug. Apart from Glenmark's filing on the Bombay Stock Exchange, the company had received an accelerated approval from DCGI for the restricted emergency use in India. On what basis did the DCGI grant the approval? Will the underlying data be made publicly available to the medical community? While the new drug and clinical trials rules 2019 allow the DCGI to grant approvals for the use of certain drugs based on the approval granted overseas, they do not see absolve it making their rationale for such decisions public. There is no information on DCGI's website explaining the scientific basis of its approval of favipiravir of COVID-19. Evidence-based medical research requires the testing of pharmaceutical drugs through randomized clinical trials (RCT), wherein one set the patients to get back to placebo or an alternative therapy, and the other set the patients get the investigational drug. Neither the drug nor the patients know what and who gets the drug. If the set of patients that gets the investigational drug shows a better outcome, it can be presumed that the drug has a demonstrable therapeutic effect on the disease in comparison with the comparator. This is the gold standard for demonstrating the efficacy of the drug in treating a particular disease. The data collected from such clinical trials are usually published in a peer-reviewed journal where they are subject to scientific scrutiny. The system had worked during this pandemic to disapprove claims that hydrochloroquine was useful for treating COVID-19. With regard to favipiravir, we know that Glenmark was conducting a clinical trial for this drug in India. According to the Clinical Trials Registry of India, that is CTRI, Glenmark's study was meant to be carried out around 150 patients at 12 different hospitals in Chhattisgarh, Gujarat, Maharashtra and Delhi, with the aim of comparing favipiravir with the standard care provided the patients with a mild or moderate COVID-19. The decision to enroll patients with a mild COVID-19 is baffling given the virtually all these mild cases often resolve them without any intervention. Further, the CTRI does not explain the nature of the standard care being provided to the patients. It is important to disclose this information from a scientific and ethical viewpoint. If we do not know the treatment with which the favipiravir is being compared, how do we know if it is any better than perhaps or a placebo? In Japanese regulator which approved this drug for the influenza mandated a warning to be printed on the packing on this drug for early embryo toxicity and teratox, specifically cautioning its use in the women in the early stages of pregnancy. The exclusion criteria listed on the CTRI list pregnant and lactating women, which is not necessarily the same thing. The protocol of CTRI also specifies that the 150 patients enrolled in the study will be randomized into 1:1 ratio. The patient's coherence is not adequate to substantiate statistically either the primary or secondary endpoint of the study. There are flaws in observational studies. Glenmark claims that in a letter to the Bombay Stock Exchange that it was granted approval based on the evaluation of the data and expert opinion. They tried to retrieve the scientific data and have tested the effectiveness and safety of the drug among mildly ill COVID-19 patients. PubMed, a database that contains more than 30 million citations and abstracts of biomedical literature, lists a single study published in the journal called Engineering. It shows that a group of Chinese investors did an observational study of 80 patients and concluded that those who got the drug tended to have faster disappearance of virus and quicker improvement of shadows in their chest X-rays. The study was not randomized controlled trial and therefore a small size apart had a serious flaws bias, that is, the sample studied is not representative of this population. It was drawn from the population of the lodge or co-founders unable to control for all the factors that might differ between the two groups. The only way to eliminate these is to design the prospective randomized controlled studies. We are not unable to find well-designed robust scientific studies on the effectiveness of the safety and the drug in COVID-19 patients. Therefore, the explanation of the grant was approved based on the evaluation of the data does not seem tenable. Subsequently, the scandal in 2012, that is, the DCGI instituted System of Reviews on the Subject Expert Committee, that is SEC, to decide whether the new drug should be approved by Indian market. The SEC was meant to have external experts who were the specialists in the field of therapy being considered. After the SEC's approval, the DCGI is required to take a final call on whether they approve a drug. Therefore, the information on which such decisions were made is required to disclose because the Right of Information Act requires such disclosure. However, in this case, the minutes of meeting, the composition of SEC and the clinical trial results submitted by the SEC or DCGI are not available in DCGI's website. A representative from the Glenmark disclosed on channel that the approval for restricted use was based on the early readout from the study. The study is expected to be completed in the coming weeks and months. So, on what basis did the DCGI approve restricted use of this drug? A culture and secrecy around the drug approvals has no purpose except then to benefit the pharmaceutical companies. At rupees 103 a tablet, at the rupees of 103 a tablet, the manufacturer stands to make a fortune once there is a bulk of orders for this drug. However, if the drug does not work as advertised, the DCGI could end up promoting widespread of misuse of this drug and a false sense of the security among the population. The regulator would be responsible for promoting irrational medicine as it has been on previous occasions. We would also caution our countrymen against any such purchases until DCGI makes a public and clinical information on the basis of which the accelerated approval has been granted, along with the minutes of SEC meeting when the drug was approved. Regarding the Favipiravir, the drug is yet to be approved by DCGI, that is Drugs Controller General of India. Next article is regarding India-Pakistan ties. In another round for tit-for-tat maneuvers, India followed Pakistan has decided to halve strength of diplomatic missions in each other's capital. The government's decision, conveyed in demarche to Pakistani's chargé d'affaires on Tuesday, follows the ill-treatment and torture Indian personnel posted in Islamabad, in clear violation of their diplomatic rights. The Pakistan contention was that two men arrested were carrying a fake currency, but it is more likely that the action was a response to arrest and the expulsion of the two Pakistani High Commissioner officials accused of the espionage last month, which were also taken to the custody by India's security officials. New Delhi also accused Pakistan High Commission officials of maintaining links to terror organizations as a reason for its decision. While expulsions of diplomatic are not uncommon between the countries as inimical to each other as India and Pakistan read, this is at the first time such a measure has been taken since 2001. The parliament attack in December 2001 and the largest military mobilization of the time, along with the Indian Pakistan border operation Parakram, were in the triggers. Eventually, after the thaw in the ties, the Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee's visit in Pakistan for SAARC summit in 2004, the move was reversed and diplomats were gradually taken back to the full strength over the 100 in each High Commission. The latest decision follows not on event but the general downslide of the relationship in the past year. After the Pulwama attack last February, the Balakot airstrike and August 5th decision to amend the Article 370 and the Constitution and reorganized Jammu and Kashmir, India and Pakistan have snapped all the trading ties, downgraded missions now without high commissioners, and shut down most diplomatic activities. India and Pakistan have also no talks since 2015, when Modi visited Lahore and External Affairs Minister met a few months later. All sporting and cultural exchanges are at the end, and for example, visas are granted apart from the rare expectation or exception being made from Kartarpur corridor inaugurated last year. From the line of control, where the ceasefire violations continue to claim lives of soldiers and civilians on both sides, practically in every multilateral forum, India and Pakistan are a part of. Both sides are in daggers down. This is regarding the Pakistan ties between India are even worse, turned down to worse from bad situation. The next article is signaling intent on government e-marketplaces. The centre's decision to make it mandatory for the vendors of government e-marketplaces procurement platform to specify the country of origin of new products listed by them on the face of unexceptionable, aimed at its promoting Indian-made goods. Apart from the place of manufacture, the platform's administrators have also sought details on the extent of local content and set guidelines on the percentage of localization for enabling procurement in the cases of bids for a specified value. However, the timing and thrust of the announcement, the setback of the government's newfound push for self-reliance in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic and devastating impact of the global economy, coupled for the recent heightened border tensions with China, raises several questions. The government's attempt to raise the share of manufacturing of economy through Make in India program had so far failed to significantly boost investments in India cutting-edge technology-driven or export-oriented industries, and instead only taken the country back to the import substitution plants, making goods predominantly for domestic consumption. To that extent, a drive of self-reliance and a greater localization risk once again eroding India's industry global competitiveness by placing a premium on Indianness over the quality or cost. The center's move with the government e-marketplaces portal has also predictably kindled and amplified the gathering clamor for identification and subsequent boycott of Chinese products, including the private e-commerce platforms. The weaponization of the trade ties, especially one where India's reliance on imports from China now extends beyond smartphones and low-cost electronics to heavy machinery and active pharmaceutical ingredients, is a double-edged sword and fraught with risk for Indian economy as well. India's drug makers, who are seeking to entrench themselves as a pharmacy to the world amid in this pandemic situation, and accompanying a rush for affordable generic treatment, depends on the northern neighbor for about 70% of their requirement bulk drug and intermediates. For India to wean itself off these dependencies will take time. The fact is that the enhancing manufacturing capacities with improved efficacy or the efficiency, reduced cost will require an overhaul of bureaucratic progress. Attaining a genuine self-reliance is a long and capital-intensive process that would require far greater investment in education, skill building, and infrastructure. The government e-marketplace move in the country for origin of best symbolic. For now, the policymakers ought to tone down any trade-linked rhetoric and give diplomats military negotiations on the room and smoothen the ties. Regarding the signal intent on government e-marketplaces, they should be approved by Government of India. And that's the end of article discussion. This is my Facebook page, and this is also my Instagram link. I have given in the description so that you can join me in Insta and follow me on Facebook. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day.